Welcome back to another episode of HR Nightmares. I am Gabbi Plumez. I'm the People and Culture Consultant with Leith HR Group. I am with our co-host today, Beth Looney, and Amy Conway.
Hello.
And then our special guest, Michael Cooper.
Hello, with Marsh McLennan Agency.
There it is. There it is. Super exciting episode today. We're going to be talking about different generations in the workplace. Super relevant. We have how many? 4 or 5 different generations in the workplace right now.
Technically 5. Yeah.
Yep.
So it's super important topic, and especially I know a lot of business owners and managers that want to hear from Gen Z, even though we're kind of in that sandwich.
Yeah, do we
generation.
consider you two
Yes.
Gen Z? Not to
think we do.
disclose your age, but
No, I think we count.
You look
we're in
young.
the
One
range.
foot in Gen Z, one foot
You look
in
young.
millennial.
Either way,
We'll
we're
make
here
it
to
work.
help managers get to know, the younger generation. So let's kick off the episode. Let's get to know Michael Cooper, and let's hear about your
Thank
story
you.
and what you're doing.
Yeah, so thank you guys for having me. Very excited to be here. But Michael Cooper, Marsh McLennan Agency. I'm in Richmond, Virginia, actually, so I'm kind of all across the East Coast. I'm stoked to be in Wilmington right now. But I'm a benefits broker with them and have been for a couple years. Love working with that team, great group of people. And yeah, I'm really just excited to be here and chat about this generation and kind of all the ebbs and flows with it. It's what I did my thesis on in school, so it's kind of personal interest, and yeah, happy to be here.
And we do have to mention that we are both UNCW
We are.
alumni.
Go
so
Yes.
Go Hawks.
we've heard
Go
the
Hawks.
stories about how you two know each other
Yes.
through NCW.
Yes. So let's get into the generations in the workplace. What are you guys seeing with your clients right now? And how are you kind of helping them navigate, different communication styles, different leadership styles, all the things? How are you guys navigating?
I think there's a lot that goes into it. I think the probably biggest disparity right now is that most of our senior level leadership is Gen Z. Some of them could be not Gen Z, Gen X. I get confused. Gen X.
It probably won't be the
right?
first time, yeah.
And so
it's gonna happen to all of us.
And there is big differences. So I think what's hard is that I do a lot of the webinars on the generations, and I love that topic because there's so many more similarities than there are differences between the generations, but so many of their desires and so many of their strengths are very much the same. They're just achieved in very different ways, and getting our senior leaders to understand that we just have to shift a little bit of our communication or a little bit of what we're offering. It's not a completely different way of dealing with people. It's just little shifts. But I have a hard time getting senior leaders, which is typically who I work with, to really help bridge that gap. And sometimes I'm like, these are your kids, dude. Like, this is your generation of children. You should know how to talk to them.
I find one of the things that you said, it was the communication piece. I find that the piece that is most frustrating to me sometimes is just the stereotyping. That kind of stuff really drives me crazy. Oh, the Gen Xers. What are you guys? Gen Zs?
No.
Gen
Zs.
Gen Zs.
We're
Yeah.
Xers. We're Xers.
Yes.
Whatever. But that the younger generations are lazy. They just don't want to show up. They're snowflakes. I hear that a lot.
Yes.
Like, oh, they're just so old. They'll melt if you say something, if you cross your eyes at them. And I think it's really worrisome and also dangerous to stereotype anyone in the workplace because you just don't want to get into that habit of an us versus them situation. So you really need to know everyone on a personal level. So.
Absolutely. And Michael, what do you think as a Gen Z and being like the younger, person in your business? Like, how do you feel walking into that? With the different.
I personally love it because it's fun for me. I like to learn, and so I've actually had some great interactions with my older colleagues who. They just want to know, what are you thinking? Like, what are your thoughts as a younger person in this traditionally, I mean, insurance is an older generation for the most part. So, what are your thoughts? What are you bringing to the table? How can we do things differently? Maybe we haven't looked at it from this standpoint. So I've really enjoyed it. I do think the communication piece is really interesting. And that's, I think, one of the overarching themes of our generation is we've been exposed to a different type of communication since we were born through the internet. And that's now changed.
You grew up with technology in your hand, right?
Yeah, a phone.
Yeah.
And we didn't have that.
Yeah, it's crazy. And I think when I was doing my thesis, this term flat communication kept coming back up. And like the way I describe it is, traditionally, or the way, several generations ago, like there was a very clear hierarchy So employee A couldn't get to the CEO just through an email, or like there was levels to it. But all of a sudden, our generation grows up and we have access to Twitter, for an example. And like I could tweet at anybody I wanted to if I wanted to get my message across.
Yeah.
So bringing that into the workplace, I does think shift that dynamic, and it's definitely made some changes.
I love that you gave that example, because I remember so clearly something that happened when I was in a leadership position years ago, and an employee complained and they took it to Twitter. I was literally like, I'm right here. You could have just come and told me. And I mean, it was something where I'm like, that's a valid reason to have not come to that event that we had or whatnot, right? But yet they took it to Twitter instead of just walking into my office and saying to my face, hey, I can't be here for that. And I would have said, no problem. Yeah. Take the day off, right? But it was just amazing that I'm like, that was the preferred method of communication. I'm like, that's how you want to communicate with me. That's fine. It's probably not the easiest way, but I'm welcome to it. But I just found that so interesting. It's just such a clear example of different communication styles.
Well, I remember very distinctly when I first started my career years and years ago, and the CEO of the company, like if he came in, we weren't even really supposed to say hello to him. Like he was a standalone person on an island, and you needed to jump from, you talk to your boss, who would talk to their boss, who would talk to their boss. And I think that nowadays it's really interesting. So if we grew up with that, that's like how we, that was our first experience in the workplace. And all of a sudden now we're working with people that are like, that's kind of BS. Like, what the heck? I'll talk to you. I want to talk to you. And so I think that that's a really important thing for the kind of senior level people now. It's like, stop making these kind of false barriers for no reason, right? Because you want to get information and feedback from every level in your organization.
And that's something that I think our generation is highly values. So when you hear Gen Z talk about, I want purpose and meaningfulness in the workplace, I really think that's one of those factors of they feel like they want at least to know what's going on within the business. This is a brief example. I was with an accountant on Wednesday for coffee, and she's 25, working at a smaller accounting firm. When I asked her, she's been there a couple of years, and I was like, well, what's kept you at your job? Because I love asking people that question. And her first answer, it wasn't benefits or culture or, pay, et cetera. It was, they're so open. And I was like, what do you mean? She's like, well, we have partners at our firm, and I'm an associate, but we have monthly meetings, and they tell me what's going on in the business, how we're doing financially, what areas of growth we're looking at. She's like, they're asking for a little bit of input, and whether that input they implement or not is fine, because I feel like I know what's going on. And that was really important for her.
At least they're asking, and that's really important. And I love that, because I think you're so right. And I think that too, employees buy into the company, if they know the plans. It's not just, here I am doing this job. It's, I'm bought in because now I know, the business is doing really good. These are the plans. This is what we have to look forward to. So I think that's super important. And I also think, and this is something that we talked about probably a year ago when we first wanted to have this episode, is that reverse mentorship. And it's so important. I mean, we all the time, Beth will call me, how do I do this in Canva? Or, something, what's another way to do this? Or I'll call Beth or Amy, what have you guys been doing? And just learning from the younger generations in the workplace, because we do have different outlooks and perspectives. And there is a lot to learn. We might be more tech savvy, so we can help out these senior level executives do stuff really effectively and efficiently. So I think it's super important to have those conversations.
Something I noticed about that. So I work with a lot of different companies, and some of the companies in the past that I've worked with, not necessarily now, when they have different ages in the workforce, right? And I think maybe one of the biggest distinguishing factors is how people use and integrate technology, right? You can kind of tell their age a little bit with that. And it's really important, and I would love to have your perspective. So an older person might feel a little intimidated to say that they don't know, because maybe they're afraid that they might lose their position, or they might lose their seat at the table if they are found out to be technically challenged. So how would you try to coach that into somebody?
Is a great question. I think often it just comes down to sometimes you don't know what you don't know. And so giving the example and seeing that this can really ease up your workload.
Right.
An example I'll use off the top of my head is paper enrollment versus online.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
You know what I'm talking about? Yeah, like I think that was the first thing that came to mind, is like going into work with an employer and they've always done paper enrollment and this is just the way it's always been. So I was like, well, what if we give you an admin system or something that can help this? And now we're up to speed. And
but
it
sometimes
helps.
that's fear, right? They're afraid that
Afraid to
they
change.
don't know how to do it, but
Right.
they're also afraid that they will be eliminated, that they won't be needed anymore.
I think sometimes, yeah, it is. I used to always say, you have to try, right? Just try. And I think that it is the fear that drives that. I don't know how to do this, and I don't want to ask. I don't want to seem like I don't know how to do it. So therefore, I don't even try. And that's what drives me nuts. I'm like, okay, try. We can work through this.
Yeah.
And we can help you with it. But this is part of it. You know, we are advancing. We advance in our customer systems and our employee systems and the ways we do our job. And everyone in the workforce has got to move along with that trajectory. And technology is part of it. So I don't really I don't know how to use technology very well. I'm like, okay, well, you got to try.
You have to build an environment of trust. So if we're working with somebody and they don't know how to do a pivot table, this has happened, and they're just, crunching along, it is going to be so much more efficient if they walk down the hall and get somebody younger, perhaps, or more experienced in doing that, and then they can learn from them. But doing it on your own without trusting that you can make a mistake or ask for help, I think that's a huge thing.
And I love your.
All that.
That's why we call Gabbi.
I know. I'm like, I had admins for a lot of years. I'm like, there's a lot of stuff I had to relearn too. I mean, and I'm not that old.
No, but you hit on it with environment of trust, right?
Yeah.
And I think as a leader, vulnerability is huge. So if I'm coming to the workplace, 24 years old, 23 years old, whatever it is, and someone senior is asking me for help, I feel valued.
Right.
I can help you with this. And even though it's maybe something really small, such as, pivot tables or something in Excel, but that's
Helping
still
with my phone.
helping with your phone. Yeah. Like whatever it is, that's still value there. And Marsh is a super tech savvy company, and we're constantly getting new platforms and things that are great for our company, and they create great efficiencies. But yeah, oftentimes it's, hey, Michael, I know we installed this recently, but you're up to speed on it. Can you help me with this? Yeah, sure. Let's go. It's easy.
Well, I think that's the commonality of like every generation wants that to be valued, and that's why it's like leading with this. There's as much to learn as there is to teach, right? And sometimes we teach, sometimes we learn, right? And if we all just embrace that, I think we would do a lot better job working across all generations and having that. I'm curious to pivot a little bit. What you see, because you are a benefits broker, you work with benefits primarily. What are you seeing from the clients that you work with as far as any trends because of these newer generations in the workforce and different desires for different benefits? Like, are you seeing any big trends of the companies coming to you saying, like, what else can we offer?
That's a great question. I'm laughing because Gabbi and I talked about not talking about benefits today.
I didn't know, so too bad.
It's all good. I think, and this was the example that I was going to use. One thing as of recent, what's really flexible? So what's a benefit that we can implement that can go across the board? Because we just hit on 4 different generations, right? So what's going to be able to apply to everybody? One of them that comes to mind recently is an LSA, so a lifestyle spending account. And what that is, it's essentially high level. It's like bonus money, but the graphic that I got the other day from a vendor was they had literally broken down from oldest to youngest, so Gen Z at the bottom and I guess boomers all the way at the top in the middle. What were they most commonly spending those dollars on? And you can imagine it was different on every single subject. The Gen Z kids were spending money on workout and Allbirds or shoes, whatever it was. Right. Versus then there was childcare and gifts, and it was a big spread of things. So I think that's something interesting as of recent. As far as anything other benefits, nothing else like specific comes to mind. Like this is like the Gen Z key.
One thing I think is interesting from a benefits perspective is I was working with kind of a friend who wanted to see about their benefits. Yeah. And their company didn't have domestic partnership benefits. And I know that a lot of companies offer that. So what are you seeing in terms of that? As opposed to having to be married in order for your spouse to receive the benefits. A lot of people are having those domestic life partners.
Yeah, no, that's definitely gaining traction too. I think it kind of speaks back to the fact that companies are really opening the doors now to what else can we offer? You know, what else can we really, what makes sense to the people?
Right.
Yeah. And so that's another great example, seeing fertility benefits come back up. So just finding ways to increase the value that they're bringing to their employee so they can then attract and retain that talent. You know, we say that all the time, and I think there's a lot of truth to it. So, you know, nothing specific really coming to mind, but yeah, I think opening the door, you know, it's kind of funny because I will meet with some folks and they're just like, yeah, we've got a regular benefits program. We haven't done much benchmarking on it recently, or, you know, it is what it is and it's always worked. And I'm like, well, do you want to look at something? Like, are you curious? And like I had like pet insurance, another one. That's another one's been popping up recently. So
yeah. We always used to hear about that, and we used to laugh. We're like, we're not offering it. We're not going to take away from like this.
But that is
but
a
people
huge
do
thing
want it
because I think the younger generations love their pets, you know, so much. And so if you can do something along that line, I think it's important. That was one of the benefits that when I was recruiting for I was trying to find somebody, and they said that, one of their benefits was that they allowed it was a pet-friendly place. You could bring your dog to work.
Yes.
And I was surprised at how many people that applied were like, I was really interested in the job because of this benefit. And you're like,
I think
I
I heard that on one of y'all's
imagine
podcasts prior.
Pippa
Yeah,
running
that was the
around the
first time I heard
office.
about it. Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah, and I think that
but it's like, let's specify what kind of pets, like
well-behaved
no
ones.
iguanas.
Not mine.
No iguanas.
Yeah.
And that's a great way to get people back in the office if that's like, you know, that's a big perk.
Yeah.
And people are like, oh, I don't want to get back into office because I have a pet at home, or the travel, you know, finding different benefits that you can offer to help them to get them back into the office is great.
I think that's a really interesting point between generations too, like the return to work right now that we're seeing. I'm just curious to hear y'all's thoughts on it, kind of what you're seeing, and we can dive into maybe a generational topic on it, but I think that's something right now that's big.
I think it's huge. There's definitely a difference between generations in their viewpoints on office work versus remote work. And I'll be honest, there's some businesses that they just can't do it. It's way too collaborative. There's way too much of like, I need this person down the hall at a drop of a hat. We're doing a contract. We can't get on a Zoom call every time we have to do this. And that's okay, right? Or it's a customer-facing business where obviously you can't be remote if your client is walking in the door to see you. So there's sometimes where I always tell the business, I'm like, we just have to be honest. It is what it is at the end of the day. But where I challenge them a lot is just that where we're just being stubborn about it. Or what I hear a lot, which drives me nuts, is the like, well, if we set a precedent for that one person, then everybody's going to want it. I'm like, so? Okay. Yeah. But if we can do that, I mean, I have a business right now where I'm like, we're out of office space, and yet you still won't consider remote employees. We literally don't have a single office left if we hire, and we have 4 open positions.
Yeah.
Where are these folks sitting? And yet we will not consider
that's going to be an interesting
people
situation.
to be even flex work, right? Where we would just have maybe cubicle space and people just came and set up when they were there. They're going to have to consider it, right? There's nothing they can do in office space. So.
And office space is a really interesting thing with generations, because I think when I was a kid, like our parents' generation, like the epic of success was the corner office, right? Yeah. And now it's like, oh, you're in this big like work table, and you all work together, and you pick up your materials, and you move wherever you need to go. And for an older person, that might be really shocking because they want the office with the door, and they feel that there's some prestige that goes along
because
with
they got
that.
piles of paper like lined up. I'm like, yeah, if you don't have an office, you can't pile up all your paper stuff, whereas I don't print anything out. Yeah. So, yeah, I see it a lot. I think that I don't think it's going away, personally. I don't. I think what I am seeing a trend of, and you guys, none of us are looking for jobs, so we may not see it, but you do a lot of recruiting work, Gabbi. Just so many roles that are putting remote in the LinkedIn job postings, and they're not truly remote jobs. Really? So it's like companies know they're trying to attract remote, and they're trying to hook, and like at the end of the day, it's not really remote, and it's, you know, people they're kind of, I don't know.
Yeah, that's kind of crappy too for a candidate, you know, like to have these expectations up front. I say that's our HR nightmare right there.
Yes, I'm hearing a lot about it from candidates. Like
it's the old flipperoo. Like it's like you're. So what are some other topics that you think? I know that we've done presentations. I've done your presentation on generations in the workplace. So what are some other big topics that you're noticing as maybe the Gen Y?
Why?
Yeah.
Is there a Gen Y? Is that technically the millennials?
I would love just to be
there
called
might
X, Y, Z. Why did the Ys get called millennials, not
That's
Why?
a good question.
I don't know.
We should do some research into that.
Oh, we'll have to Google that and get back to you guys.
Yep, we got to
Look out
follow
for that
up.
social post.
Yep.
What are some things that you guys are seeing from your kind of friends? You're out for beers. Like, what are you guys thinking in terms of what people are wanting in jobs?
I definitely think that there's and I think COVID also goes into this, but I think Gen Z as well is, but Gen Z is not really tied to a job, right? They do a lot of flip and flopping, they might stay for a year, whereas historically there were a lot of career, 20 years, you stuck with that company. And I think Gen Z, they're kind of like, oh, I'm unhappy. I'm going to go to another, company.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it's important for companies to realize this of get creative with how you can attract Gen Z and these younger generations. And how are you sticking out and retaining Gen Z and making them feel, like they belong, like they're valued. So they don't want to job hop, every couple of years, because I think that's super important. And it's super expensive for the company, turnover. And if you're constantly rotating Gen Z out or whoever out, it's going to be super costly.
This seems like a stereotype. I'm not sure if it would be, but it does seem like sometimes Gen Zers tend to think this awesome opportunities here. It's like, I can go to travel to Thailand for a month. See ya, I'm out. And they're going to go to Thailand. And opposed to maybe my generation, I'd be like, I'm going to save my PTO. And,
But I'm like, they should travel to Thailand for a month. I don't know. I'm just the person that's like, who cares? If someone comes into our business and they give us a couple of years of great work and they leave it better than they found it, then let them go on and have a great other experience.
And then they'll come back and be happy.
Yes, I'm so over, I'm the anti-HR person when it comes to measuring turnover. And do I want a revolving door of people every 6 months? No. If people are leaving in 6 months, that's a problem. But if people are staying 2 to 4 years, I think that's fair. Either we can provide them the opportunity that they move on to the next role and they continue to be challenged year after year. I would have never stayed at Nordstrom for 18 years if I hadn't gotten promoted. I mean, at one point, I think I was promoted every single year for 7 years in a row.
Wow.
So I had probably
Just that good.
You
You were just that good.
Organization, a lot of
But I probably had 13 jobs in those 18 years. There's only 2 jobs that I stayed in for more than 2 years, right? So it's like I had those opportunities there because it was a Fortune 100 company with 80,000 employees.
Yep.
But not every company has that.
Right.
Companies, when they have, a couple hundred employees, they don't have those opportunities. So if you can't provide a younger person who's early in career and needs different experiences those opportunities, then you have to wish them well and let them go get those opportunities other places.
I was out and I was talking to somebody that I hadn't seen in a long time, and a place where I used to work has now adopted a sabbatical program.
Yes.
And I'm like, what
Is
the
it paid
heck?
or unpaid?
It's partially paid. So it's a 3
that's the
month.
key.
It's
Take
3
your sabbatical,
months.
but it's not paid.
Yeah, but this is 3 months. You have to. There was some kind of parameters, like you had to work there for a certain number of years, and you've had to, gotten a good performance review. But then you can take 3 months off. And it was funny. One of our kind of joint friends was taking this time. I'm like, what are they doing? And they rented this RV, and they're driving. Not what I would want to do, but they're driving around the whole country in 3 months' time.
Awesome.
Huh.
And
You
guess
know
what?
what?
They're going to be loyal to come back.
Right.
Totally.
They are. But you know what's sad is that's a U.S. problem. The
Exactly.
sabbatical, because I traveled on a 2-week, first time I'd ever taken 2 weeks off in my career. And this was probably 17 years in. I think it was the year before I left. It was 2019. And I went to Bali with a group of strangers. These strangers half of us were from the U.S., half of us were from Europe, right? Okay, the U.S. people for 2 weeks, we were like, oh my God, this was a lot of time off. And oh my gosh, I got to check in. I got to check with my boss and my team, right? We're all stressed out. The European people were like, this is my first 2 weeks on a 6 weeks paid sabbatical. Or one had a 6 month paid sabbatical. She worked for Amazon in Germany. Paid
I want
6
that.
months. Yeah.
So
anyway.
maybe it's not a
My
generational
rant.
thing. Maybe
That's
it's
not a
just
generational thing. That's a
I'm like,
U.S.
I really want to go to Bali.
It's a
for
U.S.
2 weeks.
problem. Yeah.
So what are some other trends that you guys see that your generation is really maybe either wanting in the workplace or doesn't really like in the workplace?
Yeah. Tell us what you don't like in the workplace.
What we don't like in the workplace? That's a great question. I'm
I'm curious.
I could probably speak from a peer standpoint.
Yeah.
Because to be completely honest, I know I'm wearing the shirt right now. I really do love working at Marsh. They've been nothing short of exceptional. And I think a lot of that actually started when I was trying to intern with them. We had COVID, which was not fun. But the recruiter who was helping me was just so kind and personal, like the whole 9 yards. The people were great. So I've had a great time really working here, and I plan on being here for a while. But to pivot to some of my friends and maybe why they've had turnover, two things. One, I think there's been a lack of expectations. And maybe it was the remote work answer we were talking about earlier, right? We've got remote work on the application, and then all of a sudden, well, no, it's not.
Bait and switch.
Now you got to come back to the office.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I do think an expectation thing is there. And I think as an employer, one of the best things you could do early on is asking those employees, especially the younger ones, what can I do for you before we start working together? How well, what do you need to be coachable, to be a good employee? And then these are our expectations as a workplace. Now, we are going to provide ABC. We're going to give you great training. I think you're going to enjoy working here. Maybe our cause matches some of the reasons you have, and you're going to find purpose here in your work. But this is also how we work. And this is what it's a contract. It goes both ways. So I think that's
I want to circle that with a big marker and say that is exactly what I want everyone to hear.
Yeah.
I love that because I think a lot of times, the companies sometimes that maybe I'm working with, they're like, oh man, these younger people, they want. And I love it because it's a two-way street and they need to really express what their expectations are.
Yeah. And
I love that.
And to the generational point, I think we're going back to my research here, which was a couple of years ago, but a lot of the Gen Z, growing up, we had our parents, we had one Great Recession or 2008, but a lot of us, I think, had stable jobs. So there wasn't much maybe work growing up. So a lot of times these kids are getting into college and they're experiencing their first job. And then all of a sudden going to the workplace, this is their first full-time job. And talking to my peers when I graduated, I was a little shocked because I'd started working when I was little and I had different hourly jobs. And so I was fully used to a 40 to 50 hour work week. And then my friends graduated and they were like, whoa, what is this?
I have to work every day.
I have to work every day. And yeah, it's like, or do you
I
work?
have to be there at 8?
You work on
Every
weekends?
day
Yeah, what do
I
you
have
mean?
to be there on a Tuesday?
I don't like that either. So
Yeah.
So I think the expectations thing is a great conversation to have up front. I think it's it helps both employee and employer. And from a Gen Z standpoint too, just also understanding your employees, because I know with all of my mentors, and maybe I'm a little bit outside the normal strain here, but I grew up playing a lot of sports. So I don't really take good feedback well. Like if I do a job and Gabby's my boss and she comes over and she's like, Michael, you're just crushing it right now. You're doing so well. Good job. All this stuff. I'm going to look at it and be like, Gabby, I need some constructive feedback here. Like you can't just give me the good all the time. So I told my mentors that and the people I work with, and they're like, great, let's do it. But that's an open conversation. And once you have that, I think it can be really productive.
Yeah, we do a lot of work with leadership on just how to deliver feedback, how to receive feedback.
You guys do trainings on that, right?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, we do a lot.
We sure do.
My number one message is always just ask how that person likes to get feedback, right? Ask them what kind of feedback they are most receptive to. But I always, the people like you, because I'm a coach too, so I always coach them, and I'm like, well, why can't you take the praise and recognition too? Because realizing too that people want to give you what is deserved, right? And sometimes you just have to live with that discomfort and get good at also being praised too. Because if you deserve the praise and there isn't the constructive feedback, it's like, you're actually just doing a good job, and I need to teach you how to take that feedback too.
My managers have that conversation with me before too. And so I know it's something personal for me, and I'm like, I know, thank you. I do appreciate it.
Well, you're so used to being critiqued, right? And it's like, well, sometimes you don't need the critique,
I think sometimes athletes are like that because they just want to always get better. So they're like, the good stuff I know. I already know.
Yeah.
But it's like, tell me what I can improve
competitive.
on.
So I'm very
competitive people.
I want to get better all the time. And so I think that's interesting. And obviously not every Gen Z is like that, but still that question opens the door to doing that. Gabby, I'm curious on the Gen Z side, have you heard much on professional growth opportunities within organizations? Because I think that's one unique thing that we could go back and forth on. My company is 10,000 lives inside of an 80,000 life company across the world. You guys are 7 or 8 people.
Yep.
Yeah.
Team of HR
Yeah.
ninja consultants, right?
Right, ninja. Yeah.
very nimble, different organization. So obviously same generation, but completely different workforces.
Right.
Curious, just kind of hear takes on that.
Yeah, I think I'm hearing a lot of professional growth, not only with all of my friends. That's what they want in a company, right? They want to keep getting better. And I use this, I say I keep want to add things to my toolkit, right?
Yeah.
To like make me a better employee, a better person, both, personally and professionally. So I think that's huge in Gen Z is it might not be this, like I mentioned, it might not be this, oh, I can picture myself staying with one company for 30 years, but it might be, oh, do they provide me the opportunity to, go chase some of my interests? I might be interested in the marketing department if I'm a recruiter or vice versa, or, oh, I want to see how like the budgeting works or, different departments and having that leeway of like, oh, can I go job shadow for a day if I have, if all my work's done, just to kind of learn how other departments work. I think that's big with a lot of my friends. I don't know.
Completely agree.
Yeah.
And Beth, you're asking benefits earlier. I think this is an overlooked benefit that companies can really get into. It's just the L&D side of it.
And affordable.
I would
And
agree.
affordable.
Like,
Yeah.
Exactly.
put some money into, and I think where we try to consult with companies is like, it can be external. You don't have to provide those opportunities. You just have to provide the funding for, or maybe the resources to help. Like, here's some resources you can look at, right? But it's like, you don't have to internally provide all of those things, but you can give them some money so that they don't, because some of those are very expensive opportunities, right? To go to a 3-day seminar, it could cost $2,000. To get a professional coach, I mean, I know what I charge. It's not cheap.
Right.
And a 25-year-old who's making $60,000, might not be able to do that. So if you can fund that as a company, that is something that's really attractive to millennials and Gen Zers that is more uncomfortable to boomers and Gen Xers. Because it is, so what I will say is that is the difference of the generation. They want the growth, they want the opportunities, but the timeline of what they want that to happen is much different, right? Whereas a boomer or Gen Xer may say, I'm going to get that growth and I'm going to get that development over the course of a decade when I do these different jobs and experiences. Where a Gen Z or a millennial are like, no, I want to go to the seminar and get that within 6 months. I want to get my certification. So that's where it's like same desire. It's achieved in different ways. So companies can do a lot of things to just realize like, these are all good things. We just have to shift a little bit different to make sure we're appealing to each generation individually.
Right. And I think that it's important for companies to, remind themselves, your employees getting these certifications, ultimately that skill set's coming back to your organization.
100%.
So it's a win-win on both parties.
Yeah.
We
rolled out something. My HR team's gonna be so happy for this, and they're great. But
give them a little plug.
Yeah, seriously, they're the best. But we rolled out something recently within our organization where we really did a deep dive on all of our positions internally, giving instructions, what they do, roles, et cetera. So like, let's say if we had somebody who was in operations interested in client management. Well, now we have a way, kind of a bridge program for them to, and it's great benefit. And there's so many stories, I think, from my colleagues, and they love telling them because it's not I was interested in this and I ended up leaving because I wanted to go do communications and I couldn't do it here.
But think about
you have like a whole matrix.
Excellent like oversight management of that. So it might take maybe 3 months to prep that, right? But then think about the longevity of these people that might have jumped ship after a year because they wanted to switch.
Exactly.
And now, I mean, that is a wonderful
and even just from
recommendation.
I don't say cost standpoint, from a business standpoint, okay, so we lost one person in operations here, but we filled a role over here. So now we're backfilling one role instead of two. And we've already got somebody who knows our organization and knows our business really well.
And is passionate that they want to be there.
Well, that's
awesome.
Part of succession planning too. So like Nordstrom, we did the same thing, right? We had a whole career pathing matrix, and we believe very much in not only moving up and down the hierarchy, but moving across. Because it was about having breadths of experiences. So by the time you got to the job level I ended at, it was very important to have multiple breadths of experiences because you could not be a director and a VP at Nordstrom if you had not kind of worked across different parts of the organization.
I heard a someone described the other day as, our generation is looking for a career path instead of it's a ladder, maybe a jungle gym.
Yes.
And I was like, ooh, that's it.
I
That's
like
it.
it.
It is
Yeah,
true.
that's a
Sometimes
good
you
one,
have to
right?
go, you got to take a step backwards in order to gain the experience. I did that in my career.
Yeah.
I went from being a manager back to, I wanted to go into HR. So, I had to take a step backwards and become an HR generalist and a coordinator, even though I was at the time an equal level to the manager. And I did it for 11 months and then I got promoted to a manager, right? It was a quick learn because I already knew so much of what HR did because I worked with them as a sales manager. But there's times that you have to do that and it's good for your career.
I think it's really interesting. I'm working with a group now that just hired someone who has probably more experience. So they were a manager level, older, retirement age, but doesn't want to retire yet, right? They still have a lot to give. And so they wanted a coordinator position. And I was so glad that we were so proactive about bringing that person in. A lot of times I think recruiters are like, oh, they're too overqualified or they're going to want too much money. So they exclude them. And so by bringing this person on, we definitely ask the questions. It's like, this is a big jump down. It's not a jump up, it's a jump down. Like, tell us why you would want to do that. And she had great answers. She wanted to still be part of the work world. She was single and she didn't want to lose connections with other people. And she wanted to learn things still at her age. And so we brought her on in a coordinator position. And not only is she like killing it in this role because she's so smart and she's been doing it for so many years, but then she's also just this like ad hoc person that people go to for other experiences and information.
She's
and
probably happy
it
too.
is.
Yeah.
I
thought of doing that.
Happy.
I mean, when I left my corporate job, I'm like, I don't want to manage 35 people anymore. I don't want to have 8,000 employees. Like, I just want to do my work and not have to worry about anyone else but me and be an individual contributor for a while, right? And now I can do that, obviously, as a consultant. But I thought about, I'm like, I'm fine. I can take the pay cut. It's not a big deal. Like, I'll keep working, pay my bills, but I just don't want to be responsible for people.
Don't exclude older people that have a higher job going to a lower job.
I would agree.
Because you'll miss out on somebody great.
And I think, and the one thing that I'm seeing out of this, which I think is huge for our generation as well, and just in the workplace, but like mentorship.
Yeah.
I bet they are a fantastic mentor to whoever
they
needs
are.
them. Yeah.
And everyone's coming to them.
Yes.
And it's just, and we didn't even hire for that. It was like an extra added bonus.
There you go.
And it's just such a win-win. She's so happy to be there. She's got kind of a connection and it's wonderful. So I highly recommend thinking outside the box sometimes.
Yeah, and I think kind of on the same level here, but I'm thinking of executive level, like your CEO, your business owners that us Gen Z might not get to see all the time. Maybe as a CEO, you go hang out with, go hang out with the Gen Z, the younger employees, and see what they're doing. You put on like at McDonald's, put on the apron, flip the burgers. Because as a Gen Z or the younger generation, we're gonna have so much more respect if you're on the ground level with us, not necessarily every day, but like that you're interested and that you're bought into your company. And I think that's super important. Just to get on the ground level with your people and get to know your people and their names.
Completely agree.
More than just a number. I think that's big for Gen Z. Is like we don't want to be lost in the sauce and just kind of like these robots behind, we want to be a part of something bigger and know that we're.
And if I think, piece of advice out there for the business owners or CEOs, if you're not quite comfortable with that step, take the town hall. Like, could you do a town hall update and field some questions about your business or things going on? We have a great one at MMA. We have one regionally, we have one nationally, and then we have one at like the big level. So like all three levels, I can understand and see what's going on in our business, and it's awesome. It's really
easy
nice.
to implement.
Yeah.
Too.
Easy to implement. Yeah, it's a Zoom
great.
call.
Yeah.
We're good.
Yeah.
And that's a great example. And it's so great to hear that Marsh is doing that, because I think too, Gen Z, they historically, corporate was the dream, right? You want to work at corporate. But I think here in the last few years, I've talking to a lot of my friends are like, I'd rather work local, like local businesses. So I'm interested, and I love hearing like what Marsh is doing.
Shoot.
And and even outside of Marsh, but like, how can we get business owners to give that local business feel in these bigger corporations?
Great question.
Wheels are turning.
Stumper.
Wheels are turning.
Gabbi, I don't know.
Could you repeat the question?
Repeat the question.
Could you repeat
What's
the
the
question?
question? How can we get more corporate
Like to
have this local business entrepreneurial type feel?
And be more attractive to the younger generation. If, you know, a lot of my friends, and I don't know if conversations, but they want to feel that, you know, community, a team. And sometimes with corporate, you're lost. You're just a number. So
you're lost in a large organization.
Yep.
Okay, I see where you're going with this. I'm biased because the way that our organization is structured, and you guys may know this, with MMA, Marsh McLennan Agency, a smaller part of Marsh, we were designed by taking local agencies and then getting resources from Marsh to then better help our clients and help them succeed. So we have a local feel. You know, where I'm at in Richmond, our legacy agency had been there for decades. So it's like very ingrained in the community, you know, very happy to be there. I think, but broader scale, right, because not everybody's working at MMA. I think there are some ways of doing that, and I think it's going to be in person. I think, you know, if I'm a corporation and, you know, bringing people out to me, if you know, my team is spread across 6 cities, how can we get people together, seeing them, having a social connection there? That way they feel like it is a little bit smaller and they're not just hopping on a Zoom call every day and like, I've got people all over the place.
Also, they need to get to know that, like, what's your dog's name?
Yeah.
Are your kids playing T-ball? Like, you need to
Right.
know that your people.
I mean, I think on that, I mean, I would say my experience in a large corporation felt very small too. And I think because a lot of us have been there for so long, you just kind of grew up with those people and it felt a lot smaller than what it was. But I think kind of going back to what Michael said, right? Like, having the town halls, having the communication, having the great mentors, having the great manager that gives you feedback and tells you things. I don't think any of that people want changes at what size you are if you're doing it well, right? So I think whether you're a small business or a company of 100,000, it's about the personal relationships, right? People... It doesn't feel like a huge corporation if you like your manager and you like your peers and you have people around you, right? That it feels like a great environment. So I think it probably comes down to a lot of like the culture of the company.
Right.
But I think corporations could do a better job sometimes, like breaking down some of these like policies that feel fake and like aren't so they don't have to be so rigid about everything, right? So like some of that could probably go away and it would maybe feel a little more small.
Now we're gonna get together and get to know each other. So tell me everything about you.
Right. Some of it
I
gets a little forced.
Yeah.
Some of the like even like the force, you know, it's like DEI stuff. It's like, okay, this should be a part of your everyday culture. How do you learn how to just like live and breathe that versus it being like the inclusive class where now everyone's uncomfortable, right? Everyone's uncomfortable, right? So, yeah, I think that's probably what it is just taking a hard look and saying, like, does this have the intent that it's truly meant to have? Right. And if it doesn't, then let's scrap it. You know, there's a lot of things that corporate America has going for it that's great, and there's a lot of things that could get relooked at and go away completely.
Absolutely.
So... yeah.
Sometimes, too, I think it's like if the mission isn't juicy, I think a lot of younger people want to feel like they're making an impact in their communities or the world. And if I always think about this, if you're like making wooden dowels, not that exciting of a company. Sorry to all the wooden dowel people out there in the world. Is. But like that would be a kind of dull job, right? So then that's when you need to get creative and maybe you take your team to do a Habitat for Humanity build. You know, you need to do something. So if your company already has a great mission that you can get your folks connected to, great. But if it's not, if you make paper clips, maybe it's not that exciting. But maybe that's when you start to try to get outside the box and think of things that can connect your group.
Absolutely. So I think to kind of get our takeaways together from this episode, Gen Z, all right, what's the basics? We want communication, effective communication, and regular communication with leadership, right? I think trust is a huge, huge thing. That career progression of just adding more to the tool belt. I think a lot of the younger generation, we're hungry to learn, right? Whether, you know, some people might not believe that and think that we're, you know, who knows what, but I think adding to the tool belt, and I really do think that it all just stems with that communication piece. You know, if you're having those regular communications, checking in, you know, meeting each other where each other are at, it's going to be a successful organization.
Sometimes it's funny just how simple things can be.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know?
We overthink.
Yeah, we overthink things, and I think any manager that it's worth their salt, if their employee comes to them and says, "Hey, I'm struggling with this," they're gonna find a way to help them. You know, or they're not just gonna be like, "Well, sorry, you should leave." No, it's like, there's some ways of doing it.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and I think that, the big takeaway is, again, we have more similarities than we have differences, but it is flexing style. So, the Gen Z-ers are not in management leadership jobs yet, right? I wouldn't think many are. So it's really about teaching our millennials and our Gen Xers that the communication, it has to flex. And there are some things that we are responsible as leaders for helping teach that someone in Gen Z didn't necessarily learn their entire life, right? Like if you grew up with a phone in your hand, you did not learn how to navigate conflict in the workplace.
Right.
You wouldn't have learned that if you were a boomer or a millennial either, right? So I think we just kind of forget sometimes that we have to onboard this younger generation into the workforce as a whole as well. So there's a lot of things that, again, if we all just realize that our strengths are all a really good thing and can all contribute to the workplace and we can all help each other out, we'd be in a better place.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love it. Michael, thank you so much.
No, thank you guys for having me. This is awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks
you.
for coming
A
down.
year ago, we finally put it on the books. We finally made it happen.
We made it happen.
Super exciting. And I think it's just important to have this conversation and hear from the ground level, the employees, the Gen Z, to help business owners. So thank you. Appreciate it. To all of our listeners out there, thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure that you are subscribing on YouTube. If you are listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, any of the platforms, make sure that you follow, leave us a review if you like what we're talking about.
Yeah, and if you don't say anything.
If you have any topics that you would like us to talk about, or if you have an HR nightmare that you want us to break down, there is a link in the description. And thank you so much.
Yeah.
Check us out, leithhrgroup.com, if you want to engage our senior certified consultants and get some personalized help. We have that as well.
And unlike Michael, we do not want constructive feedback. So
there it is.
Positive reviews only.
Positive reviews only.
Thank you for tuning in.